Dr. Sella Amrenne had excavated the ruins of 7 dead civilizations in her career, and every single one of them had died screaming the same warning into the void. She stood now in the 8th, a crumbling archive chamber on the frozen moon of Corvath IV, once home to the Drenaii, a species that had vanished so completely 3,000 years ago that not even their own descendants remained to mourn them. Her scanner light swept across a wall of carved glyphs, translated in real time by the device strapped to her wrist. Earth is only pretending to sleep, the same 7 words. The same warning, carved by a species that had never made contact with Earth, that had died out roughly 2,000 years before humanity even developed writing. That's impossible. Her assistant, a young Threll researcher named Bax, said from behind her, his 4-fingered hand trembling slightly as he photographed the wall. The Drenaii predate human civilization entirely. How could they know about a species that didn't exist yet? Sella didn't answer. She'd stopped trying to answer that question 4 excavations ago. No one expected what the ground-penetrating scan revealed next. Beneath the archive chamber, buried under 3,000 years of ice and silence, was a second structure. Not Drenaii architecture, but something far older, far more advanced, deliberately hidden beneath the ruins as if the Drenaii themselves had been trying to bury it forever. Bax's scanner chimed. His voice dropped to a whisper. Dr. Amrenne, you need to see this. The buried structure was a vault, and carved into its sealed entrance in a script far older than anything Sella had ever catalogued, were 3 symbols her translator device had encountered exactly 7 times before, once at every single dead civilization she had ever excavated. A star, a closed eye, and beneath them both, a single word that didn't translate into any known language. Except it did translate. Sella had simply never let herself believe the translation was accurate. The word meant Earth. 3 days earlier, none of this had begun as a mystery at all. It had begun as routine fieldwork. Sella Amrenne worked for the Interstellar Archaeological Consortium, a coalition of 11 species dedicated to preserving the histories of civilizations lost to war, plague, or the slow collapse that came from expanding faster than a species could sustain. Her specialty was extinction pattern analysis, the study of why advanced civilizations died, in the hope of preventing the same fate from claiming the species still alive to learn from it. It was meticulous, patient work, and she had built her entire reputation on refusing to speculate beyond what the evidence showed, which was why the pattern had unsettled her for 6 years before she'd ever admitted it existed. Every civilization she'd excavated, the Ozrai hive colonies, the crystalline Vantressi, the nomadic Skarnu fleets, 4 others whose names now existed only in her field notes, had reached a level of technological advancement roughly equivalent to Earth's, and had, within a few centuries, either destroyed themselves or vanished so completely that no trace of their fate remained. And every single one, in the final years before their disappearance, had left behind some version of the same warning. Her colleagues called it coincidence. Convergent superstition, they said. Different species independently developing similar myths about a sleeping threat, the same way countless human cultures had independently developed flood myths without ever making contact with one another. Sella had believed that explanation for years. She stopped believing it the moment she found the vault beneath the Drenaii archive. Opening the vault took 4 days and violated at least 6 consortium excavation protocols, a fact Sella noted in her field log with something that felt less like professional concern and more like grim inevitability. Inside, they found no weapons, no war machines, no evidence of the ancient conflict she'd half expected. They found a library, thousands of data crystals, preserved in stasis fields that had somehow remained active for what her equipment estimated to be over 11,000 years. Technology so far beyond current consortium capability that Bax simply stopped trying to explain how it worked and started documenting instead. The truth stunned them both when the first crystal activated. It wasn't a recording of the Drenaii. It was a recording of something the Drenaii themselves had discovered, preserved, and passed down as a warning to whoever found it next, the way each dead civilization before them had apparently done for the one that came after. The recording showed a world. Blue, green, a chingly familiar Earth, but not the Earth of the present day, an Earth from a time before human civilization had risen at all, its surface scarred by something the recording's degraded audio only partially preserved. The aftermath of a war so old that the species who fought it had left almost no trace behind, except for a small, isolated population deliberately left to rebuild from nothing. They didn't just study Earth, Bax said slowly, piecing it together as the recording continued. They think Earth used to belong to someone else, someone who survived something catastrophic enough to erase almost all record of their own civilization and chose to start over as something smaller, something that looked harmless. Sella felt something cold settle in her chest, someone who chose to look harmless. That wasn't even the biggest revelation the vault contained. The deepest chamber held a final crystal, sealed separately from the rest. Its casing marked with the same star-enclosed eye symbol Sella had now found on 8 different dead worlds. When it activated, it didn't show images. It played a message, translated, impossibly, into perfect fluency by systems designed millennia before translation software should have existed. To whoever finds this, you have found evidence of a species that survived its own ending. We do not know why they chose to hide what they once were. We only know what happened to every civilization that mistook their quiet for weakness. The recording continued, and every extinction pattern Sella had spent 6 years documenting suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Each civilization she'd excavated hadn't died from natural collapse. Each one, according to the fragmentary records preserved across 10,000 years of vault archives, had made the same fatal decision at the height of its power, to test the sleeping world at the edge of known space, certain that a species with such primitive technology could offer no meaningful resistance. None of them had survived contact, not through invasion, not through conquest. Every single record described the same outcome, a species that met aggression not with overwhelming force, but with something far harder to predict or prepare for. Perfect, patient restraint, followed by a response so precisely calibrated to end the threat permanently that no aggressor civilization had ever recovered enough afterward to warn anyone but the archives they left behind. They're not calling Earth's people gods, Bax said quietly, staring at the translated text. The record is very specific about that. It says they're not divine, not supernatural, not beyond understanding. It says they're just old. Old enough to have learned lessons no young civilization believes until it's too late. The Council had made a terrible mistake 8 times over, Sella realized. 8 advanced civilizations, each certain their technology, their numbers, their history of conquest made them the exception. Every one of them had been wrong. Sella brought her findings to the Consortium's Interstellar Council 4 months later, fully expecting to be dismissed, disciplined, or quietly removed from active fieldwork for violating excavation protocol. Instead, she found the chamber unusually crowded, and, sitting near the back, unassuming in plain gray travel clothes, a human delegate she hadn't expected to see at any archaeological proceeding. His name, according to the credentials on file, was simple: Ambassador Thomas Reyes, junior liaison to the consortium, recently and quietly appointed. "You have questions," he said, once Sella finished her presentation to a chamber gone very still. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was almost gentle. "Is it true?" Sella asked, because after everything she'd found, she owed herself at least that much honesty. Thomas considered the question for a long moment. "Some of it," he said finally. "Earth has a longer history than we've chosen to share with the wider galaxy. We're not hiding it out of malice. We're hiding it because every time an older civilization has learned the full truth too early, they've reacted the way your dead civilizations did, with fear, and then with aggression, and then with extinction they brought entirely on themselves. And if I publish what I found, then you publish it," Thomas said simply. "We've never once destroyed evidence or silenced a researcher or punished curiosity. We only ask that whoever finds the truth understands what to do with it. The Drenaii didn't die because they discovered our history. They died because once they knew, they decided the only response was to strike first. Nobody had known what Thomas Reyes was truly offering until that moment. Not a threat, not a confession, but an invitation. We're not asking to be feared," he said. "We're asking to finally be understood by someone patient enough to look past the warning and ask what it actually means." Sella Amrenne published her findings 6 months later, not as a warning, but as an invitation of her own. A full, honest account of 8 extinct civilizations, and the one surviving world that had, for reasons of its own, chosen restraint over retaliation, patience over power, every single time it had been tested. She closed her final report with a line she hoped every species in the consortium would read carefully, the same way she wished, all those years ago, someone had explained it to her sooner. Earth was never sleeping. It was simply waiting for someone brave enough to ask why, instead of foolish enough to find out the hard way.